"Mother, you are no longer our priority. We have our own families now. You should understand." Those words didn't just break me, they shattered me. I stood there, holding the edge of the kitchen counter with trembling hands as my 3 children, David, Maria, and Daniel, sat across from me, their faces cold and unbothered. I felt my heart twist inside my chest like someone was wringing it dry. After everything I had given up for them, everything I had sacrificed, they had the nerve to say such a thing to me like I was a burden now. I looked each of them in the eyes, waiting, begging, for at least one of them to say it was a joke, that they didn't mean it, that they still cared. But none of them spoke. I felt like an old newspaper, read, used, and thrown away. That same night, I walked slowly into my bedroom, opened my drawer, and pulled out the envelope with my will inside. My eyes burned with tears, but my hands were steady. I reached for a pen. If they no longer saw me as a priority, then they would no longer be mine either. He updated my will. But just as I finished signing, I heard a loud crash from the living room. Let me take you back to how all this started. It wasn't always like this. I once had 3 sweet children who would run to me and wrap their arms around my waist, calling me Mama, with smiles bright enough to light a room. I raised them as a single mother after my husband died in a road accident when Maria was only 3. I was 29 years old with 3 children and no job. But I didn't cry for long. I wiped my tears and fought for my children. I sold fruits in the market. I carried baskets on my head until my neck ached. I cleaned houses for people who barely gave me thanks. I skipped meals just so they could eat. I wore the same old shoes with holes, just so they could have new school sandals. Every little coin I made, I saved for them. I never complained. When David got into college, I celebrated by boiling 1 egg and splitting it into 3, just to make it feel like something special. He became an engineer. Maria became a nurse. Daniel became a successful businessman. I was proud, very proud. But then something started to change. The calls became fewer. The visits stopped. I told myself they were just busy. "They will come soon," I would whisper every night, staring at the phone. One day I got a call. 'Twas Maria. She told me she was getting married. I screamed with joy and danced around the house alone. I thought finally they would come back. But then she said, "Mama, the wedding is in the city. Small for just friends. You don't have to come. I'll send pictures." I was quiet. My heart dropped, but I smiled and said, "Okay, my child." I watched her wedding online. She looked so beautiful. But I cried the whole time. I felt like a stranger looking into someone else's life. Later, Daniel told me he bought a house, an 8-bedroom mansion. I asked if I could visit just for a weekend. He said, "Oh, Mama, the neighborhood is strict. No visitors. Maybe another time." David. He got a promotion, bought a car, and moved to the United States. He sent me a text. "Mama, I'll be traveling a lot, so I might not be reachable all the time." That was it. No calls. No messages. My house became a lonely cave. I sat every day in my wooden chair, watching people walk past my window. I stopped going to church. I stopped smiling. Then one day I got sick. I fell in the bathroom and hit my shoulder. I lay there crying for 2 hours until my neighbor, Senora Angela, came to check on me. She called a cab and took me to the hospital. None of my children answered my calls. Not even one. When I finally reached Maria, she said, "Mama, I have 2 kids. You know how it is. Life is busy. But you'll be fine." I recovered slowly, thanks to the neighbor. Angela started checking on me often, bringing food and helping me bathe. She even mended some of my torn clothes. I never asked her, but she did it with love. One Sunday afternoon, all 3 of my children came to visit, at the same time. I was so happy I started crying. I thought maybe, just maybe, they were ready to make things right. But no. They sat me down and said those words that stabbed deeper than a knife. "Mother, you are no longer our priority." That's when I knew. I was nothing more than a shadow in their lives. That same night I changed my will. I removed their names and wrote a new name, Angela. But just as I was about to lock the drawer, I heard a crash. I rushed out and saw the front door wide open. A dark figure stood there, holding a knife. The man standing in my doorway was wearing a black hoodie and had a scarf wrapped around his face. His eyes darted across the room like a hungry animal. The knife in his hand glistened under the dim light of my small living room. Froze. My hands were still holding the will, and my breath caught in my throat. The only sound I could hear was the pounding of my heart. "Don't move," he hissed, stepping inside. I took a step back. "Please." "I have nothing," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Shut up," he barked. "Where's the money?" My legs buckled. I pointed weakly to the corner drawer, hoping to end it quickly. He rushed toward it and yanked it open, tossing out old papers, handkerchiefs, and a small wooden box I had kept since my wedding day. His hands were rough, and he seemed frustrated by how little he was finding. "Where's the rest? Where's the cash?" he growled. "I don't have any money. I swear," I cried, stepping back toward the wall, praying this would be over soon. He turned on me suddenly and raised the knife. I screamed. At that very moment, the door slammed open again. Angela stood there, holding a broomstick in her hand. "Leave her alone," he shouted. The man turned to her, distracted just long enough for Angela to swing the broom hard at his arm. The knife flew from his hand and hit the floor. He yelled and tried to fight her off, but Angela kept hitting him, screaming for help. Neighbors heard the commotion and began gathering outside. Someone called the police. The man ran out into the night, leaving the knife behind. I collapsed onto the floor, trembling and crying. Angela dropped beside me and held me tightly. "It's okay, Mama. You're safe now," she whispered. But I couldn't stop shaking. Not from fear of the man, but from the realization that the only person who came to help me that night was not my daughter. Not my sons, but a neighbor. Stranger. After the police arrived and took our statements, I sat on my couch in silence. Angela made tea for both of us, her hands gentle and steady, even after the chaos. "How did you know to come?" I asked softly. She smiled a little. "I always check on you around this time. You're like family to me." That word, family, stung deeply. Angela was not my daughter. She didn't share my blood. But in that moment, she acted more like family than the people I raised. I watched as she cleaned the mess, gathered the papers that had fallen from the drawer, and gently folded my torn bedsheet that had been dragged out in the fight. She didn't ask for thanks. She didn't complain. Later that night, I sat at my writing table again, looking at the will I had updated. I touched Angela's name, and I knew in my heart that I had made the right decision. But let me tell you something, my dear listener. Before I reached the point of betrayal, before I held that pen to remove my children's names, I had spent many long, lonely years hoping, praying, and begging for their love. I remember one cold harmattan morning. The wind blew through the holes in my window, and my bones ached with the chill. I sent a message to all three of them. "It's so cold this morning. I miss you all. Just hearing your voices would warm my heart." No reply. Nothing. So I boiled water, poured it into a basin, and soaked my feet to stop them from going numb. I looked at the calendar on the wall and circled the next holiday, hoping they might visit. I spent days baking their favorite bread, cleaning the house, laying out clean sheets. But no one came. On Christmas Day, I set 4 plates at the table. One for each of them. And one for me. Only 1 plate was used. I wrapped the remaining food and gave it to Angela's grandchildren the next morning. Time passed. I became invisible in their lives. They sent money once in a while, but it came with no phone call, no warmth, no love. Just transfers with captions like, "for medicine" or "for food." They didn't know my favorite color anymore. They didn't ask about the flowers in my backyard. They didn't remember the story I used to tell them every night, about the little bird who saved her babies from a storm. One day, I asked Maria, "Do you remember that story I used to tell you as a child?" She looked up from her phone and said, "Not really, Mama. I don't have time for stories now." I realized I had become a memory they were trying to forget. But why? Was I too much? Was I too old? Was I not enough anymore? I started walking with a limp after my fall, and sometimes I forgot small things like where I placed my glasses or what day it was. But inside, I was still the same mother who once carried them on my back, wiped their tears and kissed their wounds. They had forgotten. But I hadn't. So when they finally came to visit me, not to check on me, not to hug me, but to tell me that I was no longer their priority, I realized something. I had given my all. And I had nothing left to give. But life has a strange way of showing you who truly matters. Angela, the woman who was once just my neighbor, became my strength. She didn't have to fight off a robber for me. She didn't have to wash my hair when I couldn't lift my arms. She didn't have to cut firewood and cook for me when I was too tired. But she did. Every time. Still, that night after the robbery, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the ceiling, hearing the echo of David's voice. We have our own families now. I remembered something else too. Something I never told anyone. 3 years ago, I had secretly given each of my children a portion of my savings. I told them it was for emergencies. Just in case I passed away early. I trusted them. David bought a new TV. Maria used it for her honeymoon. Daniel invested in a business that he never told me about again. They didn't think to return it. Not even when I was hospitalized. Suddenly, I heard my front gate open again. I sat up, heart racing. Was the robber back? Well, it was worse. 'Twas Maria. She burst into the room, holding her phone high, her eyes wild. Mama, why did you change the will? I just got the message from your lawyer. I stared at her, my mouth dry. She marched toward me, anger in her voice. How could you do that to us? And before I could speak, David and Daniel stepped into the room behind her. Maria stood in front of me, her face twisted with disbelief and rage. Behind her, David clenched his fists, and Daniel's eyes scanned the room like he was searching for something to blame. Mama, Maria shouted again. Tell me you didn't do it. Tell me this is a mistake. I sat there on the edge of the couch, stunned. The same woman who once looked at me with eyes full of love now looked at me like I had committed a crime. It's not a mistake, I said quietly. I updated the will. Why? David barked. Why would you remove your own children and replace us with, what? A neighbor? Maria scoffed. Angela. Really, Mama? That woman. Daniel shook his head. This is unbelievable. My heart ached, but I kept my back straight. Angela risked her life for me. She's been there every day. She made sure I didn't die alone in this house. Where were you 3? Maria's mouth dropped slightly, but she quickly recovered. You're our mother. You should never have done this. We were going to take care of you eventually. Eventually? Yes. When I'm dead. The room went quiet. Even the fan above us seemed to stop spinning. I looked at all of them one by one. I waited for you. Every day. Every phone call that didn't come. Every birthday you forgot. Every time I fell sick and cried alone. Where were you when I needed you most? David stepped forward trying to speak. Mama. No, I interrupted. You weren't there when I fell. When I called for help, none of you came. Angela was the one who saved me from that man with the knife. You all had reasons. You were busy. You had work. You had families. So now I do too. Daniel crossed his arms. So this is revenge. No, I said, standing up slowly. This is clarity. Maria's voice turned cold. We won't accept this. You don't have to, I said. It's already done. They stood there in silence for a moment before David turned sharply and stormed out of the house. Daniel followed behind. Maria stayed a few seconds longer, her eyes full of a strange mix of fury and guilt. Then she left too, slamming the door behind her. I sat down again, shaking, but not from fear. From grief. Not grief over the will. Grief over the truth. That night I cried. Deep, heavy sobs that came from a place I didn't even know existed inside me. I wept for the years I gave, the sacrifices I made, and the love that was thrown back in my face. Angela came over when she heard the door slam. Are you all right? She asked. I nodded slowly, wiping my tears. They know. She sat beside me and put her arm around my shoulders. Let them be angry. You gave them everything. If they don't value you, that's on them. I leaned into her, grateful for her warmth. I just wanted them to care. Angela whispered. Sometimes family isn't blood. Sometimes it's who shows up when the world turns its back. That night, I fell asleep in Angela's arms, like a child comforted by a mother's hug. And for once I felt safe. The next morning everything changed. I went outside to sweep the compound when I saw a black car parked across the road. Inside I could see Maria sitting in the passenger seat, talking on her phone. David was behind the wheel. Daniel stood nearby, pacing. I tried to ignore them. But later that afternoon they returned, this time with a lawyer. Yes, we're here to talk to you about the recent changes you made to your will, he said, pulling out a folder. What about it? I asked calmly. David stepped in. We believe you were pressured, Mama. Maybe someone forced you. Maybe Angela. I stood up before he could finish. I wasn't forced. I made the decision myself. The lawyer cleared his throat. Still, it would be wise to reconsider. These things can bring conflict in the family. There's already conflict, I said. It began the day my children decided I was no longer their priority. He didn't know what to say after that. After they left, Angela helped me pack a few things. She said, maybe you should come stay at my place for a while. Just in case. So I did. Her home was small but full of warmth. Her grandchildren ran around the yard laughing. They called me Abuela from the moment I stepped inside. That night, I sat with them as they said grace before dinner. I hadn't done that in years. Angela handed me a spoon and smiled. You're home now. I wanted to cry, but instead I smiled back and nodded. But my peace didn't last long. 3 days later, I received a letter from a lawyer's office. My children were challenging the will. They were claiming I was mentally unfit to make such a decision. Angela read the letter aloud while I sat quietly on the veranda. They want to take you to court, she said softly. I didn't answer. Do you want to fight this? She asked. I nodded slowly. I have to, I said. Not for the money. For my voice. Angela took my hand. Then we'll fight together. But just as we were about to head inside, a van screeched to a halt in front of the house. The back doors flew open. 2 men in white coats jumped out. They were from a psychiatric hospital. One of them called my name. Mrs. Teresa, he asked. We're here for an evaluation. Your children reported signs of dementia and emotional instability. My breath left my body. Excuse me? I asked, stunned. Yes, ma'am, he said. We just need you to come with us for a short evaluation. Just routine. Nothing harmful. Angela stepped forward. You're not taking her anywhere without a court order. The men looked uncomfortable. We're just following procedure. Angela stood tall. Well, your procedure is wrong. I looked toward the street. Maria stood there, watching. She didn't even blink. She wanted them to take me away. I stood frozen on Angela's front porch, watching the 2 men from the psychiatric hospital move closer to me with calm but firm expressions. My body began to shake, not because I was afraid of the men, but because of the woman who stood across the street. Maria. My own daughter. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just stood there with folded arms, her eyes cold and unreadable. The taller man stepped toward me. Ma'am, we're just here to take you for a short evaluation. Your children are concerned for your well-being. If everything checks out, we'll bring you right back. Angela placed herself directly between me and the men. You're not taking her. She's not crazy. She's more sane than the people who sent you. I'm fine, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm not going anywhere. The second man tried a softer tone. Ma'am, refusing could complicate things. If a judge has already been involved. No judge has ordered anything, Angela snapped. You don't have that kind of authority. Show us proof. The men hesitated. Angela turned to me. Go inside, Mama. I'll handle this. I walked inside slowly, trembling as I shut the door behind me. Through the small curtain, I saw the men trying to reason with Angela while Maria turned and got back into the black car. She didn't look back once. That night, I lay in Angela's guest room, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Maria's face. Her expression haunted me, emotionless like a stranger looking through me. I began to doubt myself. Was I wrong? Was I being too emotional? Too harsh? But then I remembered. These weren't the actions of children who loved their mother. These were the actions of people trying to erase me because I had stopped being useful. The next morning I woke up early and went to the mirror. I stared at myself. An old woman with lines on her face. A tired woman with soft eyes. But also a strong woman. I brushed my gray hair back, dressed in my neatest clothes, and told Angela, "I'm going to fight them." We went straight to the lawyer who helped me with my will. Mr. Ricardo. A kind older man with square glasses and a soft voice. When I told him what had happened, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. "They want to declare you mentally unfit to regain control over your estate. It's a common trick in inheritance battles." "Can they win?" Angela asked. "Only if we let them," he said. "But we won't." He filed for an injunction immediately, blocking any action until the matter could be brought before a real court. Angela also helped arrange a certified doctor to perform an independent mental evaluation, right there in the office. The doctor smiled at me after an hour of questions and memory games. "Your mind is sharper than most people half your age," he said. I smiled, but my heart was still heavy. As the days passed, my children never called, not even to apologize for sending strangers to drag me away like a mad woman. Then one morning Daniel appeared at Angela's house. He wasn't alone. He brought a woman with him, a stranger, who wore a smart gray suit and carried a briefcase. "I just want to talk," Daniel said, raising his hands. Angela stood in the doorway, frowning. "We don't trust you anymore," she said. "I know," he replied. "But please, just 5 minutes." I looked at Angela and nodded. "It's okay. Let him speak." We sat in the living room, with the stranger beside him. "This is Clara," Daniel said. "She's a mediator. We want to avoid court. We're here to offer a settlement." I almost laughed. "A settlement? This is not a business deal." Daniel looked uncomfortable. "We didn't mean to hurt you. We just felt blindsided. After all we've done for you. All you've done for me." I interrupted. "When was the last time you asked me how I was feeling? When I fell, who came? When I needed food, who helped me?" His mouth opened but no words came out. Angela watched him like a hawk. "We're just asking you to be reasonable," Clara said. "Surely there's a way to share this inheritance equally. It's the fair thing." I leaned forward slowly. "Let me tell you what's fair." Clara blinked. "Fair is giving love to the one who gave you life. Fair is checking on your mother. Fair is not forgetting the hands that bathed you when you were sick and the arms that carried you when you couldn't walk. Fair is loyalty, not betrayal." They left after that, the silence heavier than any goodbye. And I thought that would be the end. But it wasn't. A week later, I went to the market alone for the first time in months. I bought bread, tomatoes, and some soap. On my way back, I passed by a small kiosk where the local newspaper was sold. And there it was, my face, on the front page. The headline screamed, "Woman inherits nothing to her children. Claims abuse and abandonment." My knees went weak. I grabbed the paper and opened to the article. There were photos of me and my children. A twisted version of my story, one that made it seem like I had gone mad in old age, manipulated by a neighbor, and was now punishing my children out of bitterness. There was even a quote from Maria. "We love our mother. We tried to care for her. But she pushed us away. She's not the same woman anymore." Angela found me on the side of the road, trembling and clutching the newspaper. When she saw the headline, her lips tightened. "They're trying to break you." "They already did," I whispered. No, she said, lifting my chin gently. You're still standing. That means you're still fighting. But that evening, as I sat in the quiet, staring at the newspaper on the table, something snapped inside me. It had taken too much. I had held on to too much hope. They were not going to stop. They wanted me to suffer, to give in, to die small and forgotten. I stood up and went to the back of Angela's house where she kept her tools. Picked up a hammer. Angela followed me outside. What are you doing? I pointed to the old wooden cabinet I had brought from my house. Inside were letters, photos, keepsakes, memories I had held on to for years. They want to destroy my truth, I said. Then I'll let go of theirs. I took the hammer and smashed the cabinet door open. One by one, I pulled out the framed photos of my children. Their baby pictures, school awards, Mother's Day cards they had made me when they were small. I dropped them in a metal basin and struck a match. Angela gasped. Are you sure? I stared into the fire as it swallowed everything. They've already erased me from their lives, I said. Now I'm doing the same. But just as the last photo curled into ash, a voice behind me said, You really mean to cut us off forever, don't you? I turned around. David was standing there. His fists were clenched. His eyes full of something dark. David stepped closer. His shadow long and sharp in the fading evening light. The fire behind me crackled and spat, sending tiny sparks into the darkening sky. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I just stared at my son, my first child, the one I carried in my belly when I was only 19, the one I once thought would protect me when I was old. His voice was low, tight, dangerous. How could you, Mama? Burning our memories. Is this what you've become? Angela stood beside me, her arms folded. She's doing what you all forced her to do. David ignored her. So this is revenge. I looked at him, my eyes calm. No, this is grief. Grief that turned into truth. I finally see who you all are. He shook his head, stepping into the yard. We never abandoned you. We were just busy. Life gets complicated. Life, I said, stepping forward. You think I don't understand life? I lived through life while carrying 3 children with no husband and no help. I faced hunger, illness, heartbreak, and loneliness. But I never forgot you. Never. Even when I had nothing, I made you my everything. David's jaw tightened. Now, I continued, my voice rising, you come here after trying to have me dragged to a mental hospital, after lying to the press about me, and you want to talk about revenge? The air between us crackled more than the fire. I did what I had to, he snapped. You made this public, not us. You updated the will and didn't even tell us. I updated the will, I said slowly, because I was no longer your priority. He looked away. You didn't call when I was sick. You didn't show up when I fell. You didn't visit until there was money involved. That's not family. David opened his mouth to argue, but Angela stepped in. You said you wanted to care for her eventually, but she needed you yesterday, and today. And none of you came. David took another step forward. I just wanted to protect our family name. Now people are talking about us. My boss saw the newspaper. He asked me if my own mother really disowned us. I gave a bitter chuckle. Now you care. Not because of me, but because of your reputation. His silence was all the answer I needed. I turned and walked toward the house. I came to apologize, he called after me. But I see now it doesn't matter. You've made up your mind. Turn back. Yes, David. Ev. But it's not too late for you to make up yours. He looked confused. You can still become a better man, I said. But not because of money. Because of truth. Because of love. Because deep down I believe there's still something good inside you. If only you stop letting pride lead you. David didn't say a word. He stood there for a moment, then walked back toward his car and drove away. I sat on Angela's porch that night, my hands trembling as I stared at the empty road. I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was tired. Angela brought me a cup of warm tea. You all right? I nodded slowly. I don't know what hurts more, losing their love, or realizing they never truly had it to begin with. She sat beside me. Sometimes love has conditions. You just didn't know it until the conditions failed. I sipped the tea. It was sweet and warm, like comfort in a cup. Days passed. Weeks. The court date came. My children, their lawyer, and I sat in a cold courtroom. Angela was by my side. Their lawyer tried to paint me as unstable. She made irrational decisions. She's being influenced by her neighbor, who now stands to benefit from her estate. I stood when it was my turn to speak. My voice was clear. I updated my will not out of revenge, but out of recognition. Recognition that love is not just words. It's action. It's presence. Angela gave me both. The judge listened carefully, then turned to my children. Have you any evidence that your mother is mentally unfit? They shook their heads. Have you personally provided care for her in the last 2 years? They hesitated. Then Daniel answered quietly. No. The judge nodded. Then the court sees no reason to overrule her wishes. The will stands. That was it. I had won. But why did it feel like I had lost something greater? After the ruling, Maria approached me in the hallway. She looked different, less proud. Her voice was soft. Mama, I'm sorry. I didn't want it to go this far. I looked at her for a long time. Why didn't you come when I needed you? She looked down. I was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid of your disappointment. Afraid that I already failed as a daughter. My heart ached. I never needed perfection, Maria. I only needed presence. She nodded, her eyes red with tears. Can we try again? I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because my heart wasn't ready. Not yet. That evening, Angela cooked us a big dinner. Her grandchildren danced around the house, laughing. The smell of chicken stew filled the air. She handed me a small gift, wrapped in brown paper. Opened it. Inside was a framed photo of me, Angela, and her grandchildren. On the back she had written, "Family is not who shares your blood, it's who shares your life." Cried. Not because I was sad, but because, for the first time in many years, I felt loved again. But just when I thought peace had returned, I received a call at dawn. Angela answered. Her face changed. She turned to me and whispered, "They're trying to freeze your bank account." They laughed at my new clothes, until I showed them the truth. "Look at her," Rachel chuckled, pointing at me in my new blue dress. "Trying to impress who? You're not young anymore, Mom." Michael laughed along with her, sipping his juice. "I bet she's trying to make us feel guilty. Too bad it's not working." I stood quietly at the door of the dining room, wearing the dress I had saved for weeks to buy. It wasn't flashy, just a soft, decent gown I thought they'd admire. But instead they laughed. My own children. I turned away from the table and walked back into my room. I shut the door, trying to keep my tears inside. The house was unusually quiet for a weekend. No music. No children's laughter. My grandchildren hadn't visited in weeks. Not since the day I told my children I was updating my will. They thought I was joking. But I wasn't. Earlier that week, I had gone to the lawyer's office in town. Mr. Cole, a kind old man, greeted me warmly and helped me draft the changes. I had decided to leave most of my estate to charities, widows, and the orphanage I used to volunteer in. I even added a clause. Only those who cared for me in my old age shall be remembered. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted peace. But I also wanted them to know I was not stupid. I could see how they had changed. How their love had conditions now. How everything depended on what I could still give them. Later that evening, Michael knocked on my door. "Mom," he said, "I was thinking maybe next weekend we could go out for lunch. Just you and me." I looked at him carefully. "Really?" he asked. He nodded. "I've been busy, but I miss you." I smiled, though I didn't trust the words fully. "That would be nice." He hugged me lightly, but something about the hug felt hollow. The next morning, I was cleaning my room when I found the envelope I had left on my table, the one containing a copy of my updated will. It was open. I hadn't left it like that. I picked it up and checked the pages. Someone had read it. Someone had gone through my private papers without asking. I sat down, my hands shaking. They knew. They knew they had been cut out. And now, things would change. By the time the next weekend came, Rachel suddenly invited me to a spa with her and her daughters. "You deserve a treat, Mom," she said, smiling brightly. "We've been so caught up, but we want to reconnect." I went along. The spa was lovely. They pampered me, massaged my feet, even paid for lunch. It was the kind of affection I hadn't received from them in years. But deep inside I knew why. They were trying to charm their way back into the will. One evening I decided to test them. I invited both Rachel and Michael to dinner at the house and asked them to help me cook. Rachel rolled her eyes. "Can't we just order something?" Michael sighed. "I've had a long day, Mom. I thought it would be fun," I said gently. Still, they groaned and dragged their feet into the kitchen. Rachel barely helped. Michael sat on his phone the entire time. I cooked most of the meal myself while they complained about the heat, the smell, and their clothes getting dirty. When the food was ready, they praised it loudly, but it was empty praise. I knew now for sure. Their kindness was temporary. The next morning I wore my new dress again and went to the church charity office. Sister Helen welcomed me with a hug. "We've missed you, Mama Grace." Smiled. "I want to donate something," I said, handing her a sealed envelope. She opened it and gasped. This is a lot." "It's what I can do," I told her. "I want it to go to the children. The ones no one looks after." She cried and hugged me tightly. At least there my love would matter. That afternoon, Michael barged into my house, face red. "What is this nonsense, Mom? You gave money to strangers while your own children are suffering." I stood my ground. "You're not suffering. You have houses, cars, jobs." He shook his head. "We're your blood." "Yes," I said quietly. "But you don't act like it." He looked at me for a long time, then said something I never thought I'd hear. "You're dead to me, old woman." He walked out, slamming the door behind him. That night I cried. Not because of the words, but because deep down I had always feared that one day, they'd stop pretending to love me. I went to the kitchen to boil water for tea. As I reached for the kettle, I slipped slightly and grabbed the counter. My hand knocked a glass off the edge. It fell to the floor and shattered into 100 pieces. I stood frozen, staring at the glass. My heart pounded. And then, I saw something that made my blood run cold. In the shards of glass near the stove was a trail of liquid oil, slowly dripping from the gas line. It wasn't there yesterday. Had someone tampered with it? The day my children found out I had changed my will, the house trembled, not from thunder but from the storm inside them. It began early in the morning. I had just finished watering my garden, humming quietly to myself, enjoying the soft morning breeze. It was the only peace I had left, until my son Brian came barging in with a folded paper in his hand. His face flushed with rage. "Mother," he barked. "What is this?" I looked at the paper. It was a copy of the updated will I had kept in my bedroom drawer. One of them must have gone snooping. I didn't flinch. I had been waiting for this moment, though I had imagined it would come with tears, not violence. "You went through my drawer?" I asked quietly, wiping my hands on my apron. He ignored my question. "You cut us off. You gave the house to the church and your jewelry to that girl from the orphanage. What's wrong with you?" My other children walked in behind him, each with the same fire in their eyes. Martha, the oldest, clutched her pearls as if trying to remind me she deserved them. Kevin, the youngest, stood with his arms folded, sneering. Sarah, who hadn't visited me in over a year, suddenly cared. "I gave it all away," I said calmly. "Because none of you gave a damn about me until you thought I was about to die." Their mouths fell open. I could hear their hearts beating in the silence. They weren't prepared for my strength. Brian slammed his hand on the table. You're insane. I shook my head slowly. No. I was insane all those years I cooked, cleaned, and cared for you without thanks. I was insane when I begged for your attention and you left me on read. I was insane when I thought love had to be earned. But I'm sane now. Martha's voice quivered. You're our mother. How could you give everything away? I walked to the fireplace and picked up a framed photo of us. It was old, worn, from the days when they used to hug me. Do you remember this picture? You were happy then. I was happy then. We used to laugh. When did that stop? They were silent. Was it when your careers took off? When your spouses started calling the shots? Or when you started seeing me as an obligation instead of a blessing? Sarah stepped forward, tears forming. I'm sorry, Mom. We were just busy. Too busy to call. Too busy to visit. Too busy to care, I said, nodding. But never too busy to ask for money. They all looked down. I updated my will because I wanted to be remembered for more than just being your mother. I gave my things to those who made me feel human, not invisible. Brian was fuming. You're punishing us. No, I replied. I'm freeing myself. That evening I sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the hills. My neighbor, Miss Jenkins, came over with tea and biscuits. She was 78 and walked with a cane, but her spirit was strong. We spoke for hours. She didn't ask me for anything. She only listened. It was refreshing. The next day news spread fast. The pastor of the local church visited to thank me for my generosity. He said the house would become a shelter for battered women. Smiled. That felt good. Later that week, Brian came again, but this time alone. He was quieter, his eyes less wild. Mom, he began, I've been thinking. I didn't answer. I was angry. Still am. But maybe you're right. That surprised me. I never realized how cold we've become. Life just took over. He nodded. It does. But we choose who we prioritize. He sighed. I wish we had done things differently. I looked at him with sadness. So do I. But regrets don't rewrite the past. That's why I rewrote my will. A month passed. Martha wrote me a letter. A real, handwritten letter. She apologized for yelling, for forgetting birthdays, for treating me like a stranger. I read it 3 times, each time more slowly than the last. It didn't change what I had done, but it softened something inside me. Sarah came to visit. She brought photos of her children, the grandchildren I barely knew. She asked me to tell them stories about my childhood. For the first time in years I laughed. Kevin didn't come. Not a word. I knew he was the most bitter. But I had made peace with that. One morning while walking through town, a teenage girl ran up to me and hugged me tight. You don't know me, she said. But I live at the church shelter now. Thank you for giving me a second chance. I cried in her arms. That moment meant more than all the jewelry and houses I'd ever owned. Weeks later, I received a formal letter from a lawyer. Kevin was challenging the will. He claimed I wasn't of sound mind. The betrayal stung more than I expected. I called my lawyer and told him not to back down. We will go to court if we must, I said. I won't be bullied. The court date arrived. Kevin stood on one side, frowning. I stood with my cane, wearing my best dress, head held high. The judge asked me why I had changed my will. I looked him in the eye and said, because I'm not a bank. I'm a woman who gave her life to her children. And when they said I was no longer their priority, I chose to become my own. The courtroom went silent. The judge ruled in my favor. Kevin stormed out. The rest of my children looked ashamed. After court, Brian hugged me. Martha kissed my cheek. Sarah cried. But I didn't undo the will. It wasn't revenge. It was survival. I spent the following months helping out at the church shelter. I baked pies, read bedtime stories to little girls with bruised faces, and held the hands of women who had nowhere else to go. They called me Mama Joy. And for the first time in decades, I felt like someone's priority. Not because of money, but because of love. The story does not end here. There is still more pain, more truth, and more strength to uncover in the next chapter. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your voice matters. Like if this touched your heart. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the rest of this emotional journey. Because sometimes, the people we give everything to are the first to forget us. But this grandma's story is far from over. See you in the concluding part, and don't forget to turn on your notification. Thank you.